Men and women of Reddit who caught their significant others cheating. How did you do that? And what was your reaction? June 1st, 2018. Normal day. A Friday. My husband had kissed me goodbye and gone to work. I was cleaning the house for company who was coming to stay the weekend. The doorbell rang. There was a man at my door who introduced himself as the husband of a woman who my husband worked with. He was there to tell me that my husband and his wife were having an affair. He had busted them about 6 months prior and had told his wife that she had to end the affair. He thinks that she did end it for about 3 months, but then they started up again. When he found out they were at it again, he called my husband because he knew if he confronted him in person, he'd be in a jail cell for what he'd have done. On the phone, he told my husband to leave his wife alone or else he would come and tell me everything that was happening. Apparently, my husband thought that he was bluffing. So I was literally the last to know. My husband never came home again. He got an and a lawyer. The divorce was December 21st, 2018. We had been together for 24 years. Still hurts. My ex and I used to share a computer. She was getting messages from her first boyfriend. I didn't bother reading them because I figured he was just saying hi or wanted to know where she was in life now. A couple of months later, I'm on the computer and she insisted that she log out while I'm there. Okay. Things feel weird here. Another couple of days pass and she wants to visit her parents. Okay, cool. I keep the kids and she goes off. I get a call from one of my buddies who works at a hotel where my ex and I are both from saying my wife just checked in with another guy. So long story short, divorced her. My ex-husband and his family smoked a lot of pot, still do. His sister, kids, and nanny were visiting from out of state for a few weeks. When it was time to fly home they left their stash at my ex-Mill's house because they didn't want to take it on the plane. My ex asked if I would pick it up because I was nearby. Stupidly I agree. I don't smoke, and I was willing to carry it in my car for him. To my surprise I found a note from the nanny to my ex saying she was in love with him, and she was so happy for the time they had together. Obviously she thought he would get the weed instead of me. While it was incredibly painful at the time, I am definitely living my best life 15 years later. I was in the Navy and was out on deployment for 6 months after just recently getting engaged. It's one of those stupid things that young military guys do. One day I get a letter from my fiance's best friend telling me that she caught my fiance and her BF together. This was years before email and smartphones were common. We write back and forth several times and eventually it comes out how she caught them, how my fiance begged her not to tell me, and that the fiance didn't know that we were corresponding. I eventually get back to the States and plan to play it off as though I didn't know, but too many of my friends intercepted me with the news that it wasn't just the one guy, but several, and let me know that she knew that I was aware. Eventually we met, and the confrontation was minimal and tame. We broke off the engagement without a lot of drama. She kept the ring. The best friend and I ended up hooking up, at first as sort of a revenge kind of thing, but turned serious. We celebrate our 32nd wedding anniversary this year. We were together for 5 years, living together for around 4. I came home from work early. When I got out of my car I saw her peek through the blinds to see who was outside. I walked in the door to her coworker on the couch, obviously uncomfortable and clothes messy and her locked in the bathroom. I wanted to pummel the shit out of him then and there, but he was a trained MMA fighter, and I Wilder left the house that night with more than a broken heart. Went to a friend's house for a while. They started dating the next day. It took a while for me to get trust back in relationships. We were engaged, and it was about 4 months to the wedding. It was her birthday, and a Friday. We had both wanted to see Blue Man Group for a while. so I had ordered tickets for us. Being a Friday, I took off half a day to surprise her. There was an unknown car in the drive, and the garage was open, which was extremely unusual. It also happened to bypass the camera we had facing the front door. I go in through the garage to hear the unmistakable sounds of S in our bedroom. I had no clue who the guy was, but he was balls deep in her A. She had the nerve to say that Anna doesn't count. I ended our relationship then and there, which her family claimed broke her. The last time I looked her up a couple years ago, she had 2 kids with 2 different guys and had spent time in prison for meth. It was a small town, so no surprises there. Her family still make me out to be the bad guy in the relationship when I ended it because I didn't forgive her. Worst of all, I never did get to see Blue Man Group in person. It wasn't a big damn breaking moment. It was a lot of little things, like how she'd cancel plans at the last second, or the random phone calls from unknown numbers she'd get. This was back before spam calls were an epidemic, or how her phone was mysteriously off one night when I needed to get a hold of her. I had my suspicions, and then finally it clicked into place when I did some Instagram snooping and found a guy who followed her who posted a selfie wearing a very unique jacket that belonged to her. I confronted her the next day. She denied it. Tears, begging, all of that. I dumped her and walked away. The next day I messaged that guy on Instagram and he confirmed everything. Had no idea I existed. He dumped her too. Last I heard she's an EMT in Wyoming. Hope she figured out how not to be a garbage person. 4 years ago I was dating a girl who became distant and disinterested in a lot of things we both enjoyed together. Despite attempts to talk about it, she only grew more distant, then became less available to hang out and suddenly was working late a lot. I started getting suspicious about cheating when she was on her phone non-stop. Again I tried to talk about it, but she wouldn't engage. She also just didn't want to break up with me for whatever reason. I was actually going to end it on my own, but one weekend, when she was seemingly unavailable, some mutual friends told me they spotted her with a dude from her work and they were all over each other. Coincidentally, she had also lent me her iPad, and it was synced to her phone, so I saw lots of texts between those two over that weekend. They were talking about running away together, etc. He was married, and her supervisor. Mutual friends were also composed of her coworkers, and reported them to ours. They were both forced to do training on not sleeping with coworkers. They were both denied promotion. His wife left him, and she moved overseas. My ex was a big drinker, and I wasn't. She would frequent this bar close to our place pretty often with friends. I rarely went, because I just wasn't a fan of bars or her drinking friends. One night she went out with a couple that I didn't mind that much. I was bored at home, so I decided to head over for a little bit. As I walk in I see my ex sitting at the bar with the couple. The bar was packed, and as soon as I made eye contact my ex she had this strange look on her face. She turns to this guy sitting next to her, and he immediately gets up and leaves. I felt something strange right away, but I brushed it off as me being irrational. I stayed for like an hour and headed home. I couldn't shake the feeling I had though, so I checked one of her friend's Facebook page to see if there was any connection that existed between my ex and this random dude. Sure enough, he was friends with one of my ex's friends. I knew his name now, and that I wasn't as crazy as I thought. I sat on the information though. The next weekend she goes out drinking again and still had not returned home at 4 AM. I tried contacting her multiple times, and I got no response. I woke up to her coming home at 7 AM and jumping in the shower immediately. I decided to check her phone while she was in the shower, and she kept all of the messages with this same guy. Some pretty telling information in the text thread. While she was still showering I grabbed a fresh pair of clothes and headed to my best friend's house. 20 minutes later I get a phone call with her going apeshit about me leaving. and not saying anything. I laughed at the projection, told her that if she wasn't moved out by Monday the police would be there to force her out. She wasn't on the lease and her parents lived 10 minutes away from me. That was that. The husband of one of the women he was cheating on me with called me at work. At first I didn't believe him and hung up. How could the man I spent the past 8 years with, had 2 beautiful babies with, suffered together the loss of one of those children do something so hurtful? Still a part of me had doubt. He had affairs in other relationships, and we had a rocky patch early in the beginning where I suspected an affair, but didn't have proof. I told my boss I felt sick and had to leave early, and I called this guy back and found out that my ex and his wife along with one of their friends were all sleeping together for about a year. He had confronted my ex and told him that he was going to tell me, but my ex convinced him to wait a month since my mother had just died. I took my time coming home and confronted him and told him to pack and leave. Since I've pieced together a lot of what happened and all the lies he told me where, if I was in a different headspace I might have caught onto the affairs earlier. I also found videos hidden on one of our computers and found out he was having booty calls in our apartment while I was at work and he was watching our daughter. At that point it put the headstone on any possibility of reconciliation. Edit due to pronoun issues GLDR. My ex-husband was sleeping with his best friend's wife while I was 8 months pregnant. It had been going on for a while. I was 8 months pregnant with our second child at the time and he wanted to go visit his brother for the weekend. I asked my doctor if it was safe for me to travel, and she said it would be fine. I told my husband I could go, but he said he was really hoping to just have some time with his brother. I understood because a new baby really makes it hard to spend quality time, but I asked if he could take our older son, 3-year at the time, so he could see his grandma and cousins. He said they were planning on drinking and whatnot and wasn't sure it would be a good idea. They're country boys so think shooting, drinking and whatnot. I agreed and he left for the weekend. After he left I get a call from his best friend telling me that he'll be in town for the weekend and he wanted to meet up. Not weird he called me because my husband was terrible at answering his phone. I told him unfortunately my husband was visiting back home. Bad timing. His best friend then said okay, I'm going to call you back, and hung up very abruptly. Turns out my husband and his wife had been caught by him a few months previously, and he gave them a chance to make it right. I don't know why. He didn't tell me, but threatened to if they didn't stop. Well, they didn't stop, and he told me. I think the worst part was that my husband's family knew and never once thought to tell me. These people were my family for 5 years and nothing. It's been almost 10 years now, and I'm so much happier, but it was definitely an eye-opening experience. I owned a house with my fiancé. I woke up in the middle of the night and he wasn't in bed. I went searching. His truck and another vehicle were in the driveway. Then, I went upstairs and found the guest bedroom was locked. After barging my way in, I found him with another woman in bed. That bed happened to be my childhood bed. He forced me out of the room, literally grabbed me by the neck, and pushed me out, and closed the door back. I knew I couldn't do anything at that point, so I called his parents who lived a few blocks away. His dad showed up, and another fight broke out. I ended up leaving and staying at his parents until dawn. I moved out that weekend and let the house foreclose 9 years later. It's finally off my credit report. I'm happily married to an amazing man, and we own a beautiful home together. Dated a girl for about 2 years. Like 18 months into the relationship we are talking about moving in together. Then kinda out of nowhere she starts becoming distant and irritable. We ended up breaking up. Fast forward 3 months after the breakup I found that Facebook has a section where messages from non-friends are kept. Turns out my then GF was banging her ex and the UPS driver that delivered to her store at the mall. She ended getting with the ups driver and his 3 kids. Last I checked they're effing miserable, and it brings me joy every time I think about it. Edit. In my messages was a note from the ups driver's then wife. My ex not only cheated, but broke up a marriage. I was at work and tried to call my boyfriend, but he wasn't answering even after a few hours, and I just got a horrible feeling. It stressed me out so badly for some reason that I started to cry, and my boss let me go home. The whole way home I just kept feeling serious dread. Walked in the house and into my bedroom, and he was laying in bed half clothed with some naked chick. Obviously a huge blow up went down, and after everything settled, this motherfucker tried to tell me that he went to the movies alone and met her there, and she followed him home. Like, even if I believe that this person just followed you home and got naked, you let her do it, so what's the purpose of saying that to me? It was a shitty abusive relationship, and it didn't even end then. I eventually broke up with him, but not on the spot, like I should have. If I could change anything about my life, it would be that I wish I broke up with that guy sooner. That was over 10 years ago though. Edit. Your responses are effing hilarious. I have never laughed so much about this situation. He went to Hawaii for a business trip without his wife and kids. Like a good wife, I packed his clothes before he left and unpacked his dirty laundry when he returned home. I found a tiny pair of white cotton panties, no lace, in his suitcase. He had recently dropped a lot of weight, 100 pounds, and played it off that he had bought them for himself. They had no label and were simple bikinis, so theoretically could have been men's as well. It did sort of explain the pretty brunette that followed him off the plane at the airport and kept looking at my kids and I at the luggage carousel. What an ass to make his side piece come face to face with his wife and kids. I made sure he wore those panties at least once a week for the remaining few months we were together. I set out his clothes every day, and he couldn't protest. This first started back in December, right before we went on a holiday trip to see my family. She started acting somewhat off, kinda distant, and easily aggravated. I had a suspicion that something was going on, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I snooped on her iWatch. Found some incriminating texts she had with a friend, so I confronted her in January. She tells me that she kissed a guy that she works with and that was it. We were having some issues in our relationship and I choose to forgive her, and we decided to try working on some of the issues we were having. Well, fast forward to this past May, she breaks down that she wasn't honest with me and that she had actually airfed this other dude. We split after the news. We had been together 8 years and had been engaged for almost 2 years. Our wedding date was supposed to be effing yesterday. It's still effing KI'ing me. I don't even know where to go from here. 2020 can go ATA. D. In a relationship for 6 years. Broke up 1 month before our wedding because I found out my fiancé had cheated on me. 2 years into my relationship with my then fiancé, lots of suspicious little acts kept adding up, the biggest one being that I found some condoms were missing from my drawer. Confronted my fiancé at the time. I was very sad / angry / confused. She denied any affair. 4 years went by, and about a month before our wedding, she broke down and confessed that she had indeed slept with her ex-boyfriend at the time because she was depressed and was simply seeking any sort of way to feel something else. That broke my heart. I was also in the middle of an insane workday from home and had to power through the rest of the job with that on my mind. Not fun. Anyways, I had always had a bad feeling that she had been lying to me over the years, and she had an undying jealousy towards all of my friends who are women. She was clearly projecting. It hurt bad that she had cheated on me, but hurt worse that she had lied to me for 4 years and went along with planning the wedding. I'm grateful that she told me before the wedding since we called it off due to the mistrust, amongst many other things, that weren't going well in our relationship. We met at a young age, so no big surprise. I genuinely believe that she was going through some really heavy emotional turmoil from her past, so I don't take it so personally. I wish her well. With that said, I have cut off all communication to her because I simply could not trust her after that. All's well that ends well, and have met the love of my life, and we plan to get married as soon as this COVID-19 takes a hike and it's safe to gather in groups again. Edit. Changed fiancé to fiancé because spelling matters. All these answers are about people who caught their spouses cheating. However, I briefly became the other woman, unbeknownst to me, and it's never sat right with me. I was young, single and going through a family crisis, sibling unexpectedly passing. I met a guy who was fun and great and very busy, which was exactly what I was looking for as I was grieving, and didn't want anything serious. 4 months of romance later, I find out he's actually married with small children. We were with his colleagues after work at a bar and a coworker asked him where his wife was. I kept my cool, didn't make a scene, but once drinks were over I obviously brought it up and said how terrible that made me feel. I ended up just ghosting him after that. I wasn't in the mental state to deal with any of the fallout, so I just stopped replying to messages. I should have contacted the wife, but I didn't want to bother playing relationship police. At the time I was under a lot of stress and grief, and had my own problems and emotions to deal with. It's been 5 years and I always feel so terrible for the wife whenever I think about what happened. Sometimes I feel like contacting her and telling her what happened, but I don't know if it's the right move or even worth it. My ex thought he had deleted the texts. I didn't usually go through his phone at all, but I had this suspicion that he was seeing someone else based on his behavior, his hiding his phone, and by staying later at work. I was actually really hurt, but mostly angry at myself for being stupid enough to date him. I had been warned he was no good, but I wanted to fix him, and I ended up getting hurt just like all the others. My reaction was initially asking him for an explanation. He tried to cover it and lied to my face. I immediately told him to get the F out of my house, and so he did. Which he responded to this by saying some very personal things about me on Twitter. It was a really bad time for me, and I hadn't done anything wrong. But I picked myself up, got the courage to apply to a job at a larger company a few hours away, and ended up moving to a bigger city. It was there that I met my now husband. Couple years later, when I was first dating my now husband, he messaged me trying to make amends and said he missed me. I ignored it, and honestly it felt so good to be able to say no to him. I'm blessed actually, he sprung me forward and helped me more than he knows. Because if that hadn't have happened, I don't think I would have applied for that job, would not have left my hometown, and I don't think I would have met my husband. Universe has a funny way of making things work out in the end. Edit. A word. Was dating a girl during college. Took her on a vacation to the beach, where I had planned on proposing to her as we had been together 4+ years. While she was in the shower, checked her phone looking for something. Saw several pictures of her making out with someone from her college. Had apparently been happening for several months. Was an awkward drive home for sure. Dropped her off at the airport the day after ending things. She ended up becoming an anti-vax and essential oils believer, so dodged a bullet there. I caught my ex-husband cheating as an accident. We had gone to work in the evening and I couldn't get into my office due to a building screw up, so he let me in his so I could print something. He went for a walk to get his steps in. As I was on his computer I realized it was logged into Facebook. I just had a feeling. I looked in the messages, and he had been chatting with a woman he met in another country via our work. I copied all I could, and confronted him when he returned, made him take me for a drink, and told him there would be no reconciliation. He was shell-shocked, and I told him to go home. and pack a bag. That was 6 months ago, and I'm really happy to have lost the dead weight. He was a difficult man, emotionally abusive, but I lived my vows and tried to help him as much as I could and reorganized my life around him. Edit due to questions. Yes, he had some odd behaviors leading up to this, including a work call from a woman on our family vacation. And in the texts he described wanting to have an affair with her, and they met periodically over 2 years, including one time he stayed with her for a month in her country. So yes, he cheated, not just a flirtation or an emotional affair.